the Garner case in New York, a growing awareness in the broader population of what I think many communities of color have understood for some time, and that is that there are specific instances, at least, where law enforcement doesn't feel as if it's being applied in a colorblind fashion. The task force that I formed is supposed to report back to me in 90 days, not with a bunch of abstract musings about race relations, but some really concrete, practical things that police departments and law enforcement agencies can begin implementing right now to rebuild trust between communities of color and the police department. And my intention is to, as soon as I get those recommendations, to start implementing. Some of them we'll be able to do through executive action. Some of them will require congressional action. Some of them will require action on the part of states and local jurisdictions. But I actually think it's been a healthy conversation that we've had. These are not new phenomena. The fact that they're now surfacing, in part because people are able to film what have just been in the past stories passed on around a kitchen table, allows people to make their own assessments and evaluations. And you're not going to solve the problem if it's not being talked about. In the meantime, we've been moving forward on criminal justice reform issues more broadly. One of the things I didn't talk about in my opening statement is the fact that last year was the first time in 40 years where we had the federal prison population go down and the crime rate go down at the same time, which indicates the degree to which it's possible for us to think smarter about who we're incarcerating, how long we're incarcerating, how are we dealing with nonviolent offenders, how are we dealing with drug offenses, diversion programs, drug courts. We can do a better job of, and save money in the process by initiating some of these reforms. And I've been really pleased to see that we've had Republicans and Democrats in Congress who are interested in these issues as well. The one thing I will say, and this is going to be the last thing I say, is that one of the great things about this job is you get to know the American people. I mean, you meet folks from every walk of life and every region of the country and every race and every faith. And what I don't think is always captured in our political debates is the vast majority of people are just trying to do the right thing. And people are basically good and have good intentions. Sometimes our institutions and our systems don't work as well as they should. Sometimes, you've got a police department that has gotten into bad habits over a period of time and hasn't maybe surfaced some hidden biases that we all carry around. But if you offer practical solutions, I think people want to fix these problems. This isn't a situation where people feel good seeing somebody choked and dying. I think that troubles everybody. So there's an opportunity of all of us to come together and to take a practical approach to these problems. And I guess that's my general theme for the end of the year, which is we've gone through difficult times. It is your job, press corps, to report on all the mistakes that are made and all the bad things that happen and the crises that look like they're popping, and I understand that. But through persistent effort and faith in the American people, things get better. The economy's gotten better. Our ability to generate clean energy has gotten better. We know more about how to educate our kids. We solve problems. Ebola is a real crisis. You get a mistake in the first case because it's not something that's been seen before. We fix it. You have some unaccompanied children who spike at a border, and it may not get fixed in the time frame of the news cycle, but it gets fixed. And part of what I hope, as we reflect on the new year, this should generate is some confidence. America knows how to solve problems, and when we work together, we can't be stopped. And now I'm going to go on vacation. Mele Kaliki Maka, everybody. Mahalo. Thank you, everybody.
The President of the United States at a news conference, a year-end news conference. He's off to Hawaii tonight with his family for a little R&R, a little vacation. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer reporting from Washington. The big headline out of the news conference, the President of the United States saying Sony Pictures made a mistake in canceling the release of the film The Interview, a film about North Korea, the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. I want to play the clip. Here is the soundbite from the president saying Sony Pictures made a mistake.
Sony's a corporation. It suffered significant damage. There were threats against its employees. I am sympathetic to the concerns that they faced. Having said all that, yes, I think they made a mistake. We cannot have a society in which some dictator someplace can start imposing censorship here in the United States. Because if somebody is able to intimidate folks out of releasing a satirical movie, imagine what they start doing when they see a documentary that they don't like or news reports that they don't like. Or even worse, imagine if producers and distributors and others start engaging in self-censorship because they don't want to offend the sensibilities of somebody whose sensibilities probably need to be offended.
The president also saying he wishes Sony Pictures had discussed the issue with him before they decided to pull the release of this film. He also said North Korea was responsible, echoing what the FBI said earlier in the day, that North Korea deliberately did this. He promised the U.S. would respond, but he refused to say how the U.S. will respond. He said only it would be proportionate, and the U.S. will respond, in his words, quote, when we choose to do so. It will be up to the U.S. He's not going to release that information in advance. Jake Tapper, very strong words from the president. I think he surprised a lot of us by going as far as he did.
He certainly surprised me. Before the press conference, you asked me what I thought, and I thought he would be more cautious and talk more about how he understood where Sony was coming from as a business. He did say that, but then he gave a very strong and sweeping statement about free speech, about not giving in to threats from people like Kim Jong-un, although I don't think he mentioned him by name, especially, he said, when it came to just a comedy film. And then he started talking about the precedent. It said, what happens if they don't like documentaries? What happens if they don't like news? Where does it go from there? It was a very strong pro-free speech statement from the president. And you're right, I'm very surprised.
Yeah, and Evan Perez, you've got new information. You're learning right now, you're our justice reporter, about the FBI, how they came up with this decision, that it was in fact North Korea. No doubt about that.
There was no doubt, Wolf. And I got to tell you one thing real quick, that what the president just says echoes what I'm hearing also from U.S. law enforcement and intelligence officials, that, they were outraged that they understand what Sony did, what they did, but they're also outraged that, in effect, a dictator won, censoring the American movie industry as a result of this hack, Wolf. And the FBI pretty quickly thought they knew where this hack was coming from, and they said that they say that there were some telltale signs, despite the fact that the North Korean hackers did a very good job to try to mask where this was coming from. They tried to route the attacks through several countries in Asia, in Europe, and even in Latin America. But in the end, what the FBI found was some telltale signs, some lines of code, encryption algorithms is what they say in their statement, and data deletion methods, they say, that showed exactly where this was coming from because it matched earlier attacks, so an attack in particular last year that was carried out against South Korean banks and media companies. And so this is one way they were able to very quickly this is unprecedented for them to so quickly make a determination, Wolf, and go public with this.
And the president also said, Evan, that there is no indication any other countries were working together with North Korea. He said he has seen nothing along those lines. This was a North Korean,
right,
he says, operation. Gloria Borger, the president, he almost seemed liberated, if you will, to go out and speak candidly, openly about not only that, but so many other issues as well.
Right. First of all, on North Korea, it was clear to me he didn't want to engage in a tit for tat because then he would raise North Korea's level, and he clearly didn't want to do it. He said, when we respond, it'll be proportional at a time and place of our choosing, and I'm not going to talk about it now, and I'm not going to raise their profile any more than it's already been raised because it's not worth it over this, over a comedy, a satire. In terms of the president's demeanor, I think he was buoyant. I can't remember the last time I saw him so cheerful other than when he won re-election, actually. And he went out of his way to say, I'm energized and I'm excited, and this is the fourth quarter, and great things can happen in the fourth quarter. He said a lot of interesting stuff happens in the fourth quarter, which it often does. And so he was clearly sending a message to the American people, as we've been talking about before he had his press conference. Look, they may call me a lame duck, but I'm going to keep quacking here. This is not over by any stretch, and I think he is buoyed by what's happened over the last 6 weeks.
Jim Schumer, the big question, though, now is what will the United States do to retaliate, if you will, against North Korea?
No question. The president's setting out, though, a very unyielding position. Like you say, we're going to decide how we're going to respond. Right. That'll be on our own time. We're not going to be rushed into this. He even had a dismissive comment for the North Korean leader. He said, it tells you something about the regime if they react in this way to a silly movie by Seth Rogen, in effect. Although he says that he likes Seth Rogen, but also
he loves Seth Rogen.
He loved them and James Franco. But he also had a message to the American people saying that we as a country have to respond this way to this kind of thing. Dismiss it, go on, go to the movie theaters, etc. But I also think it's interesting, despite all that, how North Korea, because of this hack, has rocketed to the top of the national discussion, even in a year, 2014, when we have all these other grave international challenges. Think he only had very brief mentions of Ukraine and Russia, Ebola, and the fight against ISIS, right? We've got two ground wars in Asia still going on. Afghanistan, Iraq, big commitments of U.S. troops there. Not a single question about those issues.
Right.
And consider all the stories, frankly, and discussion we were doing on that earlier this year.
He only took, 7 or 8 questions?
7 or 8 questions, all from print reporters.
Yeah, and but he really, typical his style, and you've covered him for a long time, he gave lengthy answers.
He tends to do that. Yeah. Something else that's interesting that I suspect, pardon me, a lot of Republicans in Congress are paying attention to is the fact that he basically issued veto threats. He said, if Republicans in Congress bring me bills that weaken the Wall Street reform legislation, he's going to veto it, and he thinks that he'll be able to sustain a veto, meaning the Senate won't be able to override it with 67 votes. He also, while not saying he was going to veto the Keystone Pipeline legislation that the Senate, Republicans in the Senate say will be the first order of business, he basically made the case for vetoing it, saying it's going to have only a nominal effect on U.S. gas prices. This is going to benefit Canadian gas companies, Canadian oil companies, but not really have any effect on the United States. He didn't say, I will veto it, but he laid out the case for doing so.
Well, let me bring in Jay
Republicans
Carney,
bring up.
our CNN political commentator, the former White House press secretary for President Obama. Jay, did you get the same sense that he's laying out the case to veto that Keystone Pipeline legislation? Because the Republicans clearly want to put it on the table very, very quickly in the new session.
Wolf, I know he's ambivalent about it. I know he believes that in many ways both sides of this argument have turned it into a much bigger issue than it factually is. Keystone, if it's built, will not create the number of jobs that its proponents claim it will, nor will rejecting it save